Admiral Nari watched through the massive viewing screen as orange flames danced across New Terra's surface. The human city below looked like scattered toys from this height. But she knew each burning building contained families who would never see tomorrow. Her flagship, the Dominion's Fist, hung in orbit like a predator savoring its kill. Beautiful, isn't it, Commander Jinho? Nari's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had done this dance many times before her. Scaled blue skin caught the light from the burning world below, and her forearms moved gracefully as she adjusted her ceremonial armor. Jin-Ho, younger Veltari with nervous energy, nodded quickly. Yes, Admiral, the orbital bombardment was precise. Minimal damage to the mining infrastructure. Nari's reptilian eyes gleamed with approval. 20 years of conquest had taught her the perfect balance between destruction and preservation. Kill enough humans to break their spirit, but leave enough alive to work the mines. The rare crystals buried beneath New Terra would power hegemony warships for decades. Status report on the ground forces, she commanded, her tail swishing behind. Her with predatory grace, Captain Kyung-Soo reports successful capture of the main population centers. Jinho read from his holographic display. Resistance was minimal. The humans fought with primitive kinetic weapons against our plasmic cannons. Nari almost laughed. Humans always surprised her with their foolish bravery. They would charge against impossible odds, screaming about freedom and dignity, as if such concepts mattered in the face of superior firepower. The Veltai had conquered half the galaxy with cold efficiency while humans were still learning to make fire. Through the communication system, urgent voices crackled with updates from the surface. Transport ships loaded with workers, family, separation protocols in effect. Mining supervisor Young-Ho requesting immediate deployment of excavation drones. Tell Young-Ho to begin Phase 2. Nari ordered. I want those crystal deposits mapped within 6 hours. The bridge buzzed with activity as her crew coordinated the occupation. Holographic displays showed troop movements, resource allocation, and prisoner counts. Everything proceeded with mechanical precision, just as she had done on Kepler Prime, New Athens, and 17 other worlds. Jinho approached hesitantly. Admiral, the human leaders are requesting an audience. They wish to discuss terms of surrender. Nari's laugh was sharp and cold. Terms? They're in no position to negotiate terms. She gestured toward the planet below. Show me. The main screen shifted to a service feed from the capital city. Smoke rose from collapsed buildings while Veltari soldiers herded groups of humans into transport vehicles. Children cried for parents they would never see again. Elderly humans collapsed from exhaustion as they were forced to march toward the mining camps. The human mayor, someone call Minho, is among the prisoners, Jinho reported. Should we execute him publicly? Nari considered this. Public execution sent powerful messages. But keeping some leaders alive often proved more useful. Not yet. Let him watch his people work in the mines first. Break his spirit completely. Then we'll decide his fate. Her personal communication device chimed with an incoming transmission. The holographic image of General Seokjin appeared, his scarred face bearing the marks of countless battles. Admiral Nari. Congratulations on another successful operation. The General's voice carried across space. High Command is pleased with your efficiency. Thank you, General. New Terra will exceed production quotas within 3 months. Excellent. Your next target is the human colony on Epsilon 7. Intelligence suggests they possess advanced agricultural technology we could exploit. Nari's eyes brightened. Agricultural worlds meant more slaves and better food supplies for the hegemony fleet. When do we depart? 1 week. Enjoy your victory celebration, Admiral. You've earned it. As the transmission ended, Nari felt the familiar satisfaction of a job well done. The legal department would file the necessary paperwork claiming New Terra posed a security threat to galactic peace. Some minor court would rubber stamp the occupation, and another world would disappear into the hegemony's growing empire. Commander Jin-Ho, prepare the victory feast. Invite all senior officers. What about the human prisoners requesting medical aid? Nari waved dismissively. Let them tend to their own wounds. We're not running a charity operation through the viewport. New Terra continued burning. Soon it would be just another dot on the galactic map, its former name forgotten, its people reduced to serial numbers in mining logs. Nari had perfected this process across 20 star systems, and no one had ever dared challenge her authority. The Veltari were the galaxy's chosen rulers. Blessed with superior intellect and military might, humans were simply another resource, to be harvested. Like crystals or metal ore, the law had always recognized this natural order. Admiral Nari smiled as she watched her latest conquest settle into submission. Tomorrow would bring new worlds to conquer, new resources to claim, and new slaves to feed the hegemony's endless appetite for expansion. She had no idea that somewhere in the galaxy, a human judge was already studying the legal documents that would change everything. Judge Timon's hands shook as he picked up the thick file marked New Terra Occupation. Legal review. The weight of the documents felt heavier than it should. Each page representing thousands of human lives now trapped in hegemony mining camps. His small office on the Galactic Tribunal space station felt cramped and suffocating compared to the massive chambers where his alien colleagues worked. Through his porthole window, he could see the sprawling judicial complex floating in the void. Between 3-star systems, ships from dozens of species docked at the station daily, bringing cases from across the galaxy. But in his 6 months as the first human judge, Timon had only been assigned minor disputes, trade disagreements, border violations, nothing that mattered. Until today. They're testing you, his assistant hygiene said softly as she entered with steaming cups of coffee. Her young face carried the same weight of responsibility that pressed down on Timon's shoulders. The Veltari Tribunal members want to see if you'll just sign off on Nari's actions like everyone else. Timon opened the first document and immediately felt sick. Orbital bombardment records showing civilian casualties in the thousands. Transport logs detailing the separation of families. Mining quotas that could only be met through slave labor. The evidence was overwhelming. But legally, Admiral Nari had followed standard hegemony procedure. Look at this. Hygiene pointed to a holographic display showing the legal justification. She's claiming New Terra posed a security threat to galactic stability. Same excuse she's used on 19 other worlds. And the courts always approve it, Timon muttered, scrolling through decades of similar cases. Every single one had been rubber-stamped by alien judges who never questioned hegemony authority. The door chimed and Senior Judge Crystal entered without invitation. The insectoid alien's compound eyes glittered with amusement as his 6 legs carried him across the office. His translator device buzzed with electronic clicks and hisses. Human Timon, I trust you understand the importance of maintaining galactic stability. Crystal's mechanical voice carried barely concealed mockery. Admiral Nari has served the hegemony faithfully for decades. We cannot allow emotional human sentiment to interfere with established legal precedent. Timon kept his voice steady. I'll review all the evidence thoroughly. Senior Judge, of course you will. Crystal's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Just remember that humans are still newcomers to galactic law. Don't embarrass yourselves by overreaching. After the alien left, Hygiene clenched her fists. They're not even trying to hide their contempt anymore. Good, Timon said quietly. It means they're underestimating us. For the next 72 hours, Timon barely left his office. He studied every document, cross-referenced every legal precedent, and dove deep into the labyrinthine complexity of galactic law. Hygiene worked beside him, her fingers flying across holographic keyboards as she accessed legal databases spanning thousands of years. The hegemony legal system was vast and contradictory. Built over millennia as different species joined the galactic community, ancient laws conflicted with modern interpretations. Treaties signed by long-dead civilizations still carried legal weight. Most judges ignored the older statutes, focusing only on recent precedents that favored the powerful. But Timon had learned something during his years studying human law. Sometimes the oldest rules were the strongest. Here, Hygiene whispered on the third night, her eyes red from staring at legal texts. Section 847 of the original Hegemony Charter, the Covenant of Conquered Worlds. Timon leaned over her shoulder, reading the ancient text that appeared, in flowing Veltari script with human translation scrolling alongside. His heart began to race as he understood what they had found. The Covenant was 800 years old, written when the hegemony first began expanding beyond their home system. It established strict rules for the treatment of conquered populations, rules that had been completely ignored for centuries. No conquered population shall be subjected to forced labor without trial and conviction of crimes against the hegemony. Timon read aloud. Families must be kept together except in cases of individual criminal prosecution. Civilian leaders cannot be executed without due process. She's violated every single provision. Hygiene breathed. Nari has been breaking hegemony law for 20 years. And nobody bothered to check the original statutes. Timon felt something shift inside him, a cold, hard determination that reminded him why he had become a judge. Justice wasn't about maintaining the status quo or rubber-stamping the powerful. It was about applying the law equally, regardless of species or political influence. Pull up every case Nari has handled, he ordered, cross-reference them all. Against the Covenant provisions, they worked through the night, building a database of violations that stretched back decades. Mining worlds, agricultural colonies, research stations, Admiral Nari had systematically violated ancient laws on every world she conquered. As dawn broke over the space station's artificial horizon, Timon stood before a wall of evidence that would shake the galaxy. Holographic displays showed legal precedents, treaty violations, and constitutional breaches on a scale that had never been prosecuted. They're going to fight this, Hygiene warned. The entire hegemony legal establishment will try to bury us. Double quotes. Dashmin smiled grimly as he began preparing his formal charges. Let them try. They made one critical mistake when they appointed a human judge. What's that? They forgot that humans don't know when to quit. The massive tribunal chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 50 different species filled the floating gallery seats. The courtroom itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, a transparent dome suspended in space with artificial gravity generators creating perfect conditions for multiple alien physiologies. Crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling, each one housing recording devices that would broadcast this trial across the known galaxy. Admiral Nari strode through the main entrance like a conquering hero returning from battle. Her ceremonial armor gleamed under the chamber's artificial suns, each piece crafted from metals taken from conquered worlds. The 4 golden stars on her collar caught the light as she moved, reminding everyone of her rank and power. Behind her marched her legal team, 12 of the galaxy's most feared advocates, led by the legendary Doyun. Doyun was a Zephyrian, her ethereal form seeming to float rather than walk. Her species had dominated galactic law for 3 centuries, their natural telepathic abilities making them nearly impossible to deceive in court. She had never lost a case involving military conquest, and her fee for this trial could have purchased an entire star system. Look at this pathetic display, Nari whispered to her legal team as they took their positions, a human judge trying to prosecute a hegemony admiral. This will be over before lunch, the gallery murmured with excitement, as news drones from major networks positioned themselves for the best angles. Reporters from the Galactic News Network, Hegemony Broadcasting, dozens of smaller outlets prepared to document what everyone expected to be a routine legal formality. Then Judge Time-In entered. The chamber fell silent, unlike the other judges, who arrived in floating ceremonial platforms. Time-In simply walked to his position wearing a simple black robe. His human appearance seemed small and insignificant compared to the massive alien advocates and officials surrounding him, but something in his eyes made the room hold its breath. Hyjin sat at the prosecutor's table, surrounded by towers of holographic documents and legal precedents. Her hands moved quickly across multiple display screens, organizing evidence that had taken months to compile. The contrast was stark. While Doyun's team lounged confidently with minimal preparation, the humans had clearly worked day and night preparing for this moment. This tribunal is now in session. Time-In announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement system. The case before us concerns the military actions of Admiral Nari on New Terra and 18 other worlds over the past 20 years. Nari's smirk was visible even from the gallery. She had sat through dozens of these proceedings, each one ending with legal validation of her conquests. Her scaled skin rippled with amusement as she watched the small human judge shuffle through his papers. Before we begin, Doyun rose gracefully, her voice carrying melodic tones that resonated through the chamber. I motion to dismiss all charges on the grounds of established military necessity doctrine. Admiral Nari acted within full legal authority to protect galactic security. The gallery nodded approvingly. This was the standard defense that had worked for centuries. Military necessity trumped almost every other legal consideration in galactic law, but Time-In didn't flinch. Motion denied. We will proceed with full examination of the evidence. Doyun's ethereal form shimmered with surprise, but she maintained her composure. Very well, Judge, though I must warn that questioning established military doctrine sets a dangerous precedent. Time-In activated his first holographic display, showing orbital bombardment footage from New Terra. The images were devastating. Civilian structures exploding, families running for shelter, children separated from parents in the chaos. Even the hardened alien dignitaries shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral Nari, Time-In's voice remained calm and steady. You ordered the bombardment of civilian targets on New Terra. Can you explain the military necessity for destroying hospitals and schools? Nari stood confidently. The entire colony was a threat to galactic stability. Our intelligence indicated potential rebellion brewing among the human population. What evidence supported this intelligence? That information is classified under military security protocols. Time-In nodded, as if he had expected this answer. Interesting, because according to Section 847 of the original Hegemony Charter, military actions against civilian populations require documented evidence of actual threat, not suspected threat. A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. Most of the aliens present had never heard of Section 847, and certainly never expected a human judge to cite ancient hegemony law. Doyun's form flickered with concern. Your Honor, that statute is 800 years old and has been superseded by modern military doctrine. Has it? Time-In activated another display showing the original Hegemony Charter. Article 12 clearly states that the Charter's provisions cannot be superseded without formal amendment by the full Hegemony Council. I see no record of such amendment. The chamber erupted in whispers. Even the news drones repositioned themselves, sensing that this trial was not going according to script. Time-In continued methodically. Admiral Nari, you also ordered the separation of families on New Terra. Children were placed in separate facilities from their parents. Under what authority? Standard population control measures, Nari replied. But her confidence was beginning to waver, necessary to prevent organized resistance. According to the Covenant of Conquered Worlds, families cannot be separated except in cases of individual criminal conviction. Can you provide documentation of trials for these families? Doyun leaped to her feet. Objection. The Covenant is an archaic document that doesn't apply to modern military operations. The Covenant was never repealed, Taimin stated firmly. It remains binding hegemony law. Admiral Nari, where are the trial records? Nari's forearms gestured frantically. We don't conduct trials for entire populations. That would be impossible. Exactly, Taimin said quietly. Which makes your actions illegal under hegemony law. The gallery was now in full uproar. Delegates were arguing among themselves. News drones were broadcasting live updates across the galaxy. And Doyun's legal team was frantically searching through legal databases trying to find precedents to count. At Taimin's arguments, Hajin smiled as she watched the chaos unfold. Months of preparation were paying off. Every statute Taimin cited was legitimate. Every precedent was binding, and every argument was unassailable under the hegemony's own legal system. Nari's scaled skin had lost its gleaming confidence. Now, appearing dull and mottled with stress, for the first time in her career, she was facing an opponent who couldn't be intimidated or bribed. The human judge was using the hegemony's own laws against them, and there was nothing they could do to stop him. The tension in the tribunal chamber had reached a breaking point. Admiral Nari's scales now showed patches of angry red, a biological response that betrayed her rising fury. Her forearms trembled as she gripped the defendant's podium, her claws leaving deep scratches in the metal surface. You dare lecture your superiors, human. Nari's voice echoed through the chamber like a roar from some ancient predator. Her tail lashed behind her, knocking over a ceremonial water vessel that shattered on the floor. Your species crawled out of caves while we were building star empires. You exist at our mercy. The gallery gasped at this outburst. Never before had a defendant shown such disrespect in the sacred tribunal chamber. Several alien dignitaries activated their personal shields, fearing that Nari might attack the human judge physically. But Taimin didn't move from his position. His voice remained steady and calm, cutting through Nari's rage like a blade through silk. The law recognizes no species as superior. Admiral, your own hegemony constitution states this clearly in Article 7, Section 3. All sentient beings are equal before the law, regardless of evolutionary origin or technological advancement. Doyun's ethereal form was now flickering rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among her species. Her telepathic abilities were being overwhelmed by the chaotic emotions flooding the chamber. She frantically sorted through holographic legal files, her usually graceful movements now desperate and clumsy. This is impossible, she whispered to her legal team. These statutes haven't been cited in centuries. How did a human find them? Her chief researcher, a multi-tentacled Kefri named Il-sung, worked frantically at multiple data terminals simultaneously. His species could process information at incredible speeds, but even he was struggling to keep up with Taimin citations. Judge Taimin is accessing legal databases we didn't know existed. Il-sung reported through his translator device. These laws predate our modern legal framework by hundreds of years. Meanwhile, Taimin continued his methodical destruction of Nori's defense. He activated another holographic display showing detailed records from the mining camps on Nu. Terror, the images were devastating. Humans working in dangerous conditions without protective equipment. Children as young as 12 forced to operate heavy machinery. Elderly prisoners collapsing from exhaustion. Admiral Nari, these are the conditions in your labor camps. Taimin stated matter-of-factly, according to the hegemony workers' protection Act of 2847. All laborers must receive adequate safety equipment, medical care, and reasonable work schedules. Can you explain why these standards were not met? Nari's voice cracked as she responded. Those weren't workers. They were prisoners of war. Under what declaration of war? Time-In asked immediately. New Terra was never at war with the hegemony. They were a peaceful agricultural colony with no military capabilities. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The distinction between prisoners of war and civilian captives was fundamental to galactic law. By admitting she treated civilians as prisoners of war, Nari had just confessed to major war crimes. Doyu leaped to her feet, her form now barely stable. My client misspoke. She meant to say they were security detainees. Security detainees must be processed through civilian courts within 30 days. Time-In replied without hesitation. Where are the court records for the 200,000 humans detained on New Terra? The silence that followed was deafening. Every being in the chamber understood what that silence meant. There were no court records. Because no trials had been held, Nari had simply enslaved an entire population without any legal justification. Hyjin stood at the prosecutor's table, activating a massive holographic display that showed a timeline of Nari's conquests over 20 years. Each world was represented by a glowing dot, with legal violations listed beside each conquest. The pattern was clear and undeniable. Systematic war crimes across dozens of star systems. Kepler Prime to 500,000 civilians enslaved without trial. Hyjin read aloud. New Athens, 300,000 families separated in violation of the Covenant. Tau Ceti 7-150,000 elderly and disabled inhabitants abandoned to die in mining shafts. With each citation, Nari seemed to shrink. Her magnificent armor now looked like a costume. Her military decorations like toys pinned to a child's uniform. The powerful admiral who had terrorized the galaxy for decades was being revealed as nothing more than a common criminal who had hidden behind legal loopholes and institutional prejudice. The alien dignitaries in the gallery were now talking openly, among themselves, many pointing at Nari with expressions of disgust. Even species that had traditionally supported hegemony expansion were beginning to distance themselves from the Admiral's actions. Senior Judge Crextel, the insectoid who had mocked Time-In weeks earlier, was now frantically consulting with other tribunal members. His compound eyes darted between Nari and the mounting evidence, clearly calculating the political implications of this trial's outcome. This changes everything. He buzzed to his colleagues. If these precedents stand, half the galaxy's military operations could be declared illegal. In the press gallery, reporters were broadcasting live updates that were already causing shock waves across civilized space. Stock markets were crashing as investors realized that military conquest would no longer be a reliable source of cheap labor and resources. Time-In activated his final piece of evidence, a recording from Nari's own ship during the bombardment of New Terra. Her voice came through clearly, laughing as civilian shelters were destroyed, joking about how easy it was to break human resistance. The recording played for 3 minutes of damning audio that removed any doubt about Nari's intentions and state of mind during her crimes. When it finished, the chamber was completely silent. Even Nari had stopped protesting, her face showing the dawning realization that her career, her freedom, and her legacy were all about to end in this room. Judge Time-In closed his final file and looked directly at the Admiral who had once seemed untouchable. Admiral Nari, do you have anything to say in your defense? The question hung in the air like a challenge. But Nari had no answer. The human judge had systematically destroyed every argument, every excuse, every legal protection she had relied upon for decades. The galaxy watched as the mighty fell. The tribunal chamber held its breath as Judge Time-In rose from his seat. The weight of galactic history pressed down on this single moment, and everyone present understood they were witnessing something that would reshape the known universe. News drones hovered silently. Their cameras focused on the small human figure, who had somehow brought the mighty hegemony to its knees. Admiral Nari of the Veltari Navy. Timon's voice carried clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics, after reviewing all evidence and testimony. This tribunal finds you guilty on all charges. The words hit like thunder. Nari scaled. Skin went completely pale, her forearms trembling as the reality of her situation finally sank in. For 20 years, she had believed herself untouchable, protected by military rank and species superiority. Now she stood exposed as nothing more than a war criminal. You are guilty of crimes against sentient beings on 19 worlds. Timon continued methodically. Guilty of systematic violation of the Covenant of Conquered Worlds. Guilty of abuse of military authority. Guilty of enslaving civilian populations without due process. Each charge fell like a hammer blow. In the gallery, alien dignitaries whispered frantically among themselves. The hegemony's legal representatives sat in stunned silence, realizing that centuries of unchallenged military expansion had just come to an end. The evidence shows a pattern of deliberate cruelty spanning 2 decades. You have separated families, forced children into dangerous labor, executed civilian leaders without trial, and caused the deaths of over 2 million innocent beings across multiple star systems. Hyjin watched from the prosecutor's table as her mentor delivered justice with surgical precision. Months of sleepless nights and painstaking research had led to this moment, and she felt tears streaming down her face as Timon spoke for every victim who could no longer speak for themselves. Therefore, Timon's voice rose slightly. I sentence you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Your military rank is stripped. Your assets are seized for victim compensation. And all worlds under your occupation are to be immediately liberated. The chamber erupted in chaos. Nari's scream of rage echoed off the crystalline walls as she lunged toward the judge's bench. Her claws extended, but hegemony security forces were ready. Massive robotic guards surrounded her instantly, their energy restraints crackling to life as they bound her arms and tail. This is impossible. Nari shrieked as the restraints tightened. I am Admiral of the Hegemony Navy. You cannot treat me like a common criminal. You are no longer an admiral. Timon replied calmly. You are prisoner number 847 Delta, and you will be transferred to the maximum security facility on Titan 7 immediately. Though you made one final desperate attempt to save her client, Your Honor, we request an immediate appeal to the Supreme Galactic Court. Denied, Timon said. Firmly, this tribunal's jurisdiction is final in matters of war crimes. The verdict stands. As security forces dragged Nari from the chamber, her screams echoed through the corridors of the space station. Beings from dozens of species watched in amazement as the once mighty Admiral was reduced to a common prisoner, her ceremonial armor replaced by standard detention restraints. The news spread across the galaxy at light speed. On New Terra, human survivors wept with joy as they watched the trial's conclusion on emergency broadcasts. Families torn apart by Nari's occupation began the long process of reuniting with loved ones. The mining camps that had enslaved hundreds of thousands were ordered shut down immediately. But the impact went far beyond New Terra. Within hours of the verdict, legal officers across the galaxy were flooded with new cases. Oppressed worlds that had suffered under similar military occupations suddenly realized they had legal recourse. Species that had been enslaved for generations began filing formal complaints with Galactic Courts. Young-Min, a human lawyer on the colony world of Proxima, received his first call just 6 hours after the verdict. Please help us, the voice on the communication device pleaded. The Zephyrian Empire has been using our people as forced labor for 30 years. We saw what happened to Admiral Nari. Can you do the same thing for us? Within days, Timon's small legal office was overwhelmed with requests for assistance. Hygiene coordinated with human legal advocates across the galaxy, sharing the research techniques and ancient legal precedents they had discovered. What started as one case against one admiral had become a galactic movement for justice. The Hegemony High Command went into emergency session, reviewing their military policies in light of the verdict. Admiral Seokjin, who had praised Nari's efficiency just weeks earlier, now faced his own legal challenges as prosecutors examined his role in authorizing similar operations. Sir. His aide reported nervously, 17 more worlds have filed legal complaints against our occupation forces. Human lawyers are citing the same ancient statutes that brought down Admiral Nari. The political implications were staggering. Military expansion, which had been the foundation of hegemony power for centuries, was suddenly legally questionable. Stock markets crashed as investors realized that cheap slave labor was no longer a guaranteed resource, but in a small courtroom on a space station between the stars. Judge Timon was already preparing for his next case. The files on his desk represented dozens of similar situations: military occupations disguised as security operations, civilian populations enslaved without legal justification, families destroyed by species-based prejudice. Ready for the next one? Hygiene asked, placing another thick file on his desk. Tidashmin smiled as he opened the case documents. Always, justice doesn't take breaks. Across the galaxy, the message was spreading. Humans had shown that even the most powerful military forces could be held accountable under the law. Species didn't determine legal rights. Military rank didn't place anyone above justice. And sometimes the smallest voice could speak the loudest when it spoke the truth. The age of unchallenged military conquest was over. The age of galactic justice had begun. And it all started with one human judge who refused to rub a stamp in justice. No matter how much pressure he faced, the end.